Okay. It's 11 or 10, so I think we can start. So, good morning, everybody. I would like to welcome you on this first UCC webinar that we are organizing. Very happy that you are so numerous. I think this shows that there's a lot of interest in the topic. My name is Eric Geerts, and I will be presenting today together with my colleague Martin Meacock. So we are both in product management, looking at our European customs portfolio. I'm based in Belgium. Martin is based in the UK. He's also focusing quite a lot on the UK customs product. So the first time we do this webinar, the idea is to repeat it every 2 weeks, at least before the 1st of May. After that, we might change the frequency a little bit. So for today, we've got a whole agenda. So after a short introduction, we'll talk about the main UCC objectives. State of play, especially with the focus on May 1st. We will also look at the UCC simplification and opportunities. And last but not least, we will also highlight specific elements for 2 countries, UK and the Netherlands. So the idea is that every time we will give you an update on a couple of countries. So next time it can be, for example, Belgium, Sweden. We still have to see how quickly we can go through this part of the presentation. That's the agenda for today. So I suggest, we'll just kick off. So the goal of this webinar is to inform our customers on the latest UCC changes. This is still continuously evolving. So actually, it's something target currently. The focus is on the impact of the UCC on the customs software, because we are a software provider, and we also want to provide information on country specifics, because all UCC is a European program or European legislation. We experience that there are quite some differences in approach and interpretation between the various countries. Important is to ask the question, how should I prepare for the UCC? First of all, it's important to understand the basics. I'm not saying that every employee in your company should read the full legislation. What's more important is to analyze the impact of the UCC on the current procedures and the way of working. This is something we cannot do for you because it's different for every customer, and it goes far beyond the use of any customs software. So the question is, do I have the required knowledge in-house, or should I ask help? There are a lot of consultants in the market that are, of course, happy to assist you in analyzing this impact. But of course, if you've got sufficient knowledge, then you can also tackle it yourself. And what we also advise is to start an internal project and build a plan. So look at the changes, then calculate when you should start to do specific updates to your way of working. Last but not least, we would also like to give you some information. You can find information on the UCC. First of all, the European Commission has just come up with some e-learning webinars. I think it's been very useful. Secondly, we are also sending newsletters per region. For example, last week we sent a newsletter in the Netherlands, which will also be done for other regions like the UK and the Nordics. Then we have set up resources Knowledge Center. You can find it on the URL that is shown on this slide. After the webinar, we will distribute the slides, so you don't have to copy them. And finally, it's important to read the guidelines and the frequently asked questions, both from the European Commission and the national customs. Actually, the Commission is currently finalizing a set of guidelines for export, import, and beyond. So stay tuned for that. As soon as we have the final versions, we will also keep you up to date, of course. So,
Eric?
So this was, yeah, Martin?
Yeah, I was going to say thanks. I think I was going to just cover the
correct.
Give some background for people. The UCC and its objectives. So, for everybody who's perhaps not 100% familiar, the Union Customs Code actually is. It's the single customs regulations for the whole of Europe. And its aim, when it started, was really to try and facilitate legitimate trade, as we can see there, but also harmonise and standardise customs controls across all member states. Whether those aims will actually be realised in its immediate implementation is still to be seen. But key issues in the UCC is that all communications must be electronic. So you'll see there's a plan really touch on every aspect of customs and regulations and applications to make that an electronic process. Just for people online, if you can just press *1 to mute line, just avoids any feedback and any noise in the background. So it's 1 to mute. That's great. Thanks. So yeah, as I say, it was really to make all communications electronic and try and make a paperless environment for customs. Now, some member states, that's not as a big jump as in others. Another thing that comes through the UCC is really safety and security. Obviously, there's a big focus on safety and security and pre-arrival notification, and that's really shown throughout the UCC. And obviously, from a customs point of view, from a government point of view, they're keen on controlling the revenue risk. And as we go forward and seeing some of the changes and some of the challenges, a lot of that is around that managing of risk, or what they perceive to be a risk to customs duty and the revenue. So where are we as of today? The legislation is now all in place. It really started many years ago in the UCC, which was finally agreed around 2013, I think. Was just to allow the negotiations. So end of last year, what we saw was two acts, the Delegated Act and the Implementing Act, which really puts the meat on the bones on that framework. What they realised was that actually, because of the IT changes and the late publishing of those two acts, it wasn't possible for everyone to meet it. So what they've published, actually published on the 15th of March, is a transitional act. And what that really does is address the fact that there's a lot of things that cannot be done in the Implementing Act, purely because the member states don't have the systems in place to do electronically. So a lot of the Transitional Act is allowing time for member states to use existing paper-based methods until they have electronic systems up and running. So the 1st of May, which is the big deadline date for the UCC, not the end. It's merely the start. What we're going to see is a transitional period running through to 2020. National systems will be changing at various paces, and again, the Transitional Act allows that, providing that there's been no impact on common European systems. So if it impacts data between member states, there has to be some kind of alignment, but it's purely national. It'll be down to national member states to decide when they implement certain parts of the UCC. And obviously that creates challenges in itself for any company that's operating across the EU. If anyone's operating with a current authorization, those can continue pretty much as are, with a few exceptions, until customs come out and either reauthorized or they're reassessed, which has to be done by May 2019. So, as really, we're in a transitional period. The 1st of May is I would like to say, is the start of the end, but it's the start. Things that are definitely changing on the 1st of May, the headline elements. Anyone using IPR drawback, that definitely goes. There can be no more goods entered drawback on the 1st of May. Anything in drawback can be re-exported and claimed through the normal throughput period. Type D warehousing, from a UK perspective, we don't see a great deal of Type D warehousing, but it is common in other member states. Type D warehousing will get going, and Eric will touch on that in his when he talks about specific Dutch changes. Anyone who's using processing under customs control, that now transfers to a special procedure, just inward processing. And so what inward processing relief and PCC really operates along the same lines. The only difference is if there's a diversion to free circulation, on what basis is that duty being calculated? Is it being calculated on the finished product, the PCC type arrangements, or is it being calculated on the goods that were entered into processing, which was the IPR arrangements? Benefit for trade is there's no interest if you divert to free circulation to pay to customs, but again, the details are still being worked through. First sale, if anybody was using first sale, this is where you could use the factory price rather than the intermediate selling price for the basis of customs duty. Stopping, and there's been a whole question about what is a sale for export and when does that sale, the final sale, actually crystallise, and we'll touch on that in one about the national elements. Again, a bonus for people is that you're now able to do remote retail sales in customs warehousing. So this was often a problem for many companies, e-com companies, that had to remove the goods to free circulation or to another special procedure before they could fulfil an e-commerce sale. Now they can do that within the customs warehouse and release the goods. That's what's definitely changing on 1st of May. What's happening currently, as Eric touched on, there are a number of EU working groups issuing a great deal of guidance. Not necessarily the answers, but so there's a great deal of guidance coming out, which creates a lot of questions in itself in many cases. So that's going out to member states, the trade to interpret and take on board. Then the member states will issue national guidance, are issuing national guidance. Again, talking from personal experience in the UK, anyone in the UK has probably seen a huge amount of guidance being issued in the last couple of weeks, various aspects. Again, not always the easiest to follow. They try to cover every kind of scenario, and it's really down to each trader trying to distill that information and make it applicable to the business. So, where do we see the particular headaches coming out of this? Well, the biggest challenges, as I said, has been the late publication of the legislation and guidance. As a software company, obviously to make changes, and it's very difficult to make those changes when you don't have any clear guidance as exactly what's being expected or required. We're with the drip feed of changes under transitional measures. As I said, we've got between 2016, 2019, 2020, when things will be implemented at various paces across Europe. That provides an incredible headache and challenge to try and coordinate, implement, dual-run systems. As I mentioned it on the previous slide, bonded warehousing, first sale, customs valuation changes. So, there is now a point coming out of customs that said if there is an actual sale, proper sale for export prior to entry into the customs warehouse. That's used. If that's not in place, if there is subsequently a sale warehouse, then it's that sale in warehouse that has to be used. Again, that will provide some challenges for traders in determining, do they have a value, when should they put that value on to any custom system. There's process, so as I said, there's changes in processing under customs control, inward processing, bonded warehousing. A lot of these will have knock-on effects to trader systems, ERP systems. From our point of view as software provider, any customs warehouse modules, duty management modules that we provide, we have to make changes. One that's come up recently in some guidance that's caused some confusion is the definition of an exporter. The EU has issued some guidance which in some cases contradicts the VAT definitions. A particular example would be where an EU company is set to an intermediate company who's selling to a non-EU country. The EU exporter, as we would know now, has no contract as a sale for export and has no control over the goods. The EU suggestion is that it's the intermediate company, even if they're outside of the EU, that would be declared as the exporter and have to appoint an indirect representative, effectively as declarant. Now, I think that's causing a lot of headaches for people in terms of exporter, are they not an exporter? What gets declared? Are they going to have sufficient evidence for zero rating for VAT purposes? So again, here's an example of something that's being introduced in guidance, which just raises more questions and potentially more headaches. What applies in the UK, maybe not in all member states, as I know in some member states there's already a high level of guarantee requirement, but guarantees become mandatory across the EU. So in the UK that's something new. So a guarantee will be required for any actual debt or potential debt. There is scope to reduce them or waive them, but that's going to really be reliant on the authorised economic operator criteria be met, or actually having AEO status. So on that, Eric, I've given everybody the bad news, maybe you can pass some good news in terms of what opportunities there are.
Thank you, Martin. Yeah, let's also talk about the simplifications and the opportunities. Actually, we see two types of simplifications. The first type is related to the data requirements and the documents. Examples are a reduced data set, a simplified declaration, such as an entry in the declarant's records. The second one is related to the procedure, the flow of the goods. Two examples are that you can lodge declarations 24/7 because of the waiver for presentation. Another example I will come back on shortly is centralized clearance, where you can declare the goods in a country that is different from the country where the goods are imported or exported physically. We've listed a few of these simplifications or opportunities. First of all, temporary storage, where you can more easily move goods between two temporary storage facilities. Second one is centralized clearance. This is still expected to take some time before it will be possible in many countries. Officially, the timelines are also more towards 2020. Actually, the two main challenges, first of all, the IT challenges, which means that the systems of the member states need to be more connected to each other. The second challenge is on the VAT side, because VAT is still a national responsibility or national thing. So we see quite some relations to the current use of SASP, so the simplified procedures single authorization for simplified procedures. That's the correct explanation. So we see that companies that are using this still need to do VAT-related declarations and reports in the different member states. For example, CEO declaration just for the VAT purposes. Some other programs or simplifications such as self-assessment, so that you don't have to send always a declaration, but you keep you keep the information in your own systems, and you're calculating your own duties, etc. Of course, then you can still get audits or controls, but this is more the system-based audit and control flavor. And then reduced guarantees is another opportunity, of course. What is very important for all these simplifications is that you have the AEO certificates, especially the Type C, which is for simplified customs procedures. You can, of course, also apply for the S, which stands for safety. For example, if you want to have reduced data sets for the safety and security information. But definitely, the importance of AEO is much bigger with the UCC. So I will pass it back to Martin. He's going to talk about the UK.
Thanks, Eric. So yeah, for the UK, and apologies for anyone not from UK, but you might have a UK interest. I'm not going into too much detail. Obviously, we've got not a lot of time. We could probably spend a day talking through all these changes, but just highlight some of the changes that I've identified that people should be aware of, and maybe look a bit more deeply into if they're not already aware of them. So if you're operating a customs warehouse, obviously we've already raised, you could now do retail sales in customs warehouse. Just need to maybe look at the valuation, what value is being declared. Are you satisfied there was a proper sale for export when the goods entered the customs warehouse? If you are operating simplified procedures in customs warehousing, so that you're doing in the UK, it's called CFSP. You do your simplified frontier declaration. There's currently no requirement for a supplementary declaration. That presents some challenges. A lot of duty management systems use that supplementary declaration as the creation of a stock record, so that you have all the data when you need to declare the goods coming out of the customs warehouse. So a bit of a challenge. Customs, there's still some questions whether it's going to be optional or whether it's absolutely not possible to submit that come the 1st of May. Onward supply relief restrictions. So onward supply relief is the tax shift arrangements for VAT. So a lot of countries operate this, that goods imported into one member state for onward supply to another. You can zero rate the VAT at import. Now the Committee generally has felt that there's been a lot of abuse, whether there has or not, but they feel there has. So you've really cut down on the use of that under simple procedures. So for customs warehousing, for goods coming out of a customs warehouse, a lot of people would have been using simplified procedures, local clearance, which is now entering the declarant's records, EIDR. Customs have said, what the Commission has said is that's not possible for supply relief. So if you have got any goods that are moving onwards supply out of a customs warehouse, you have to declare them to customs, have that declaration accepted before you can move the goods. Now, customs have said you can still use simplified procedures, but as Eric pointed out, there's still two types of simplified procedures. You have to declare in advance, because you're probably less likely to get any kind of physical intervention. But you need to declare prior to the goods being removed. local entry in the declarant's records, a lot of traders in the UK will already be authorised for blanket notification. So there's not a lot of traders that are telling customs before they move the goods. Normally a notation in the ERP or the duty management system, and then declarations are being submitted subsequently. When it comes down to new applications or reassessment, customs are saying no, yes, you've got AEOC, and we're coming back to that AEOC, and you've got a waiver, a notification waiver, you will need to send an electronic notification. Now, interestingly, electronic notification to the data in it pretty much have to be doing real-time processing. So again, that creates a challenge for some traders. Already touched on the onward supply relief. So although you can still use simplified procedures in a warehouse, although they have to be physically held, customs have said you can't use the normal simplified procedures for onward supply. So if somebody's doing that on import, to standard CFSP, that will have to revert back to normal procedures. Processing, just a note, heads up, if anybody's using IPR, the customs procedure codes are changing, and the content of those customs procedure codes are changing, so there's going to be additional information that has to be declared, and normally that's declared. And if there's anyone using end use, it's now this new bill of discharge. I've had it confirmed from customs in the UK that the Commission, although the legislation, the UCC, doesn't allow for any kind of aggregation or scheduling, they realise that there's a lot of people using end use, airlines, thousands upon thousands of items being to end use on a daily or monthly basis. So in the UK at least, they are looking at accepting a monthly return schedule. Obviously, traders will probably want to look to produce that fairly regularly and on time, because it will actually discharge any guarantee liabilities as well. Exports, low clearance, technically under the UCC, entering the declarant's records doesn't apply to most exports. It only applies to very few exports. So customs have come up with a new version of LCP, and they're calling it Customs Supervised Exports. Stress, it's an LCP. Challenge there is if there's any associate legislation that refers to LCP, and I think excise is potentially one of these, then that legislation doesn't apply currently to some supervised exports. So I think there's still some to be done there on certain trade sectors. So if you're involved in those, again, you need to be keeping an eye on that. And again, probably a very niche, very small market, but anyone dealing with oil pipelines into the UK or continental shelf oil rigs. Previously, there was a lot of paper simplifications. There are still simplifications, but they fall within the standard either simplified declaration procedure or in the declarant records type arrangements. There are special ones with pipelines, monthly pre-lodgement of declarations. So there's still some opportunities there to. So it's not so onerous, but you need to be looking at those if you're involved in that sector. So that's the UK. I'm conscious of the time. So Eric, if I pass over to you to cover.
Yep. Thank you.
Netherlands.
So I'll talk a bit about the Netherlands. Also there we have changes on customs warehousing. If the sales only happens in warehouse, in case there was no sales yet, that value should be taken. Actually, there is still some discussion in case there are multiple sales in warehouse. Basically, you have to take the sales where you've got an invoice from. That's kind of guidance we've heard from the Commission and from Dutch Customs, basically. So it's important to provide the correct value in outbound. So this is different because we have many customers that only provide the value at inbound. So this is still possible in case there was a sales before it's entering the EU, and this is still correct. But in specific cases, it's important to provide the value at outbound. Secondly, there is the end of the Type D procedures. Of course, it's related also to the value, which I just discussed, but there are also other facilities, such as on exchange rates. Now you have to use the exchange rates at the time of importing, so at the time you put the goods into free circulation. This of the IPR drawback, of course, that doesn't have a lot of impact because most of our customers are using suspension already, so we don't expect big issues there. Of course, there is a change in some of the customs procedures codes that are not out anymore. For example, also the codes on the PCC, customs control, production customs control, that now also go to the IPR regime. There's a change for the BTIs, so the binding tariff information. The validity period is going to change from 6 years to 3 years. But what's more important that the reference to the BTI becomes mandatory in the declarations. Of course, only in case you have a BTI, because not all companies have this, and also not for every article. Including also in the GPA periodic declaration. So there are some specific fields where you need to put this reference. Then what's going to change is that the re-export declaration becomes mandatory for bonded goods. So everything that you store in the bonded warehouse and that you want to re-export will need to have a re-export declaration. The current practice in the Netherlands is that only NCTS is used, so the transit procedure. In the new way of working, you can still have the situation that the export declaration is followed by NCTS, where data from export is taken over into NCTS. So this is the so-called combined declaration. It's not mandatory. If you've got the authorization to go to the border with your export, that's also possible. One of the advantages of using the combined declaration is that you automatically get your exit confirmation and the transit procedure. Of course, the transit procedure still has to be followed up, but in some cases the response or the feedback is quicker than the exit confirmation. But of course, that's up to the companies to decide which procedure they want to use. These changes, unfortunately, are still in the Sagita export system, as AGS export is not rolled out yet. So this process is only starting now, and there are no real dates for actually 99% of the companies. So that it's a pity because it means that changes still have to be done in Sagita export. Last, there is a remark on the exchange rate. So from first, you can only use the monthly exchange rate. So in case exchange rates are going up and down, you still have to use the monthly rates. Actually, this is not a big change for most companies, most customers, as you're already using monthly rates. Just to be clear, we're currently doing all these changes in our software so that they're ready to be used before the 1st of May. We will further also approach different customer groups to discuss the specific changes and also to estimate the impact, especially in customer-specific interfaces and customer-specific configuration that has been done in the applications. So we will, of course, keep you more up to date as we have a better idea on the exact date that the release or the service pack will come out. Yeah, Martin, if you can switch it. So we've now come at the last slide. So what we would like to ask for the next webinar is to send your questions to the email address that you can see on the slide, so ucc@descartes.com, so that in the next webinar we can go through these questions and provide you answers. We still have to see how many questions we will get, so we don't know yet whether we'll be able to, of course, treat all your answers to all your questions. If they're not discussed in the webinar, you will still get feedback, of course, so we will not leave your question unanswered. Because the group is so big, we unfortunately don't have the possibility to open the floor at this moment for questions. So that's why we ask you to send them. So we further, of course, communicate on future webinars, send the invitations for the dates, and based on all these questions, we will compiling a frequently asked question list that we're going to add on our website, most likely to the UCC Knowledge Center I referred to in the beginning of the presentation. We are now really at the end of our first webinar. I hope you found it interesting and useful. And for us, this is of course also new, especially as we are organizing this for our complete European customer group. What I forgot to say is that, okay, we've seen updates for UK and the Netherlands. In the next webinars, we'll discuss the changes for the other countries. And I think it has become clear that the changes are not the same in every country. So we believe this is a very important topic for the next webinars. Martin, did you want to add anything else at this point?
No, I think, like you, thank you for those that have joined us and stayed with us for the last 40 minutes. Hope it was of interest. Obviously, only really scratched the surface on issues, but hopefully it highlights those areas that individually need to focus on and maybe do a bit more research on. So, thank you.
One last remark. Yeah, one last remark from my side. If you haven't looked at the UCC yet, please start looking at it now. It's quite, might be confronted with quite a lot of headaches, as we said during the presentation, because different from the MCC, so the Modernized Customs Code. It looks that this is really going to happen because MCC was never implemented for various reasons, but we have a strong feeling that for UCC it's going to be different. It's going to have impact for a lot of companies, especially international companies that have complex supply chains. So yeah, please make sure you take the necessary measures. From our side, we of course will help you in providing you information and also updating our applications. Of course, you have to. We cannot decide which value we need to take. This is something you will need to provide us. All right. Thank you for your attention, and of course we hope to see you next time. And have a good Friday and a good weekend. Bye.